Stories of life told by photographers.
What's that song? Blue skies shining at me. Well, we don't have that today. It's another one of those bleh sky days. And I'm not quite sure that song would have sounded quite so nice with bleh skies shining at me. Oh, look at it. Grey, grey, grey. Turn south, grey. That way, still grey. Reasons to be cheerful, part 3. There we go. 2 song references in less than a minute, I'm sure. We're back on Planet Letter reading this week. There's a reason to be cheerful. Fresh from a couple of weeks of specials, spending time with photographers and storytellers. I hope you enjoyed them. I had a fantastic time. It was great to meet with Hilary Roberts a couple of weeks ago, curator for the Imperial War Museum's curator of photography. Learned so much from that show. Not just about photography, about history. It was a history fest, and so was last week, spending time with Paul Hudson on his guided tour of York and Grimsby and Cleethorpes, where we also met up with Dan Baker, the street photography by the shore, and of course Sean Tucker, a dash of Sean, a sprinkling of Sean, a dash of Tucker. There we go, Sean. That's the podcast title you and I were talking about. That's it. A sprinkling of Sean. Although that's beginning to sound like a cookery show now. Photowalk. It's a Friday. We're walking together once again. Me with my microphone, you with your camera, me with my camera as well. Let's get a scene setter. Oh, the rain's started as well, which does at least give you a chance to get out that rain theme that I always use when it's raining during a photo walk. I tell you what, the path here is looking lush though. We've had a lot of rain the last week and a half. I was very lucky when I went to walk in York with Paul. We had 3 glorious days, but the lushness, this is a path I walk along quite regularly with you, and I reckon in a month, maybe less, it will almost be impassable. Let's get another shot. A sketchbook to start the day. Impassable because all the I can see the nettles beginning to really flourish. Right, where are we? I'm on my X Pro 1 this week. I've got the 28mm Yashica lens, the lens gifted by our friend of the show, Tim Binder. 500th. I'm on ISO 800. You could go lower than that, Neil, I know, but I can't juggle everything. I've not got enough hands. Right, here we go. Scene setter, a sketchbooker to start the show.
The Photo Walk is brought to you by mpb.com. Quality used photo and video kit. Buy, sell, trade, create at mpb.com.
Very excited. I received from MPB just the other day my 16 to 55mm lens to go on the XH2S's that I've got. It's a lens I've used but never owned before, so I'm very much looking forward to putting it through its paces this summer. For my monologue-y thing at the start of the show, which is going to be, well, we're going to meander a bit for reasons you'll understand, I'm sure, as we go along. I want to talk to you about something with a touch of heavy heart, an element of terror, but also a degree of hope. Oh, Neil, this sounds serious. Is this a too Garibaldi moment? Or shall I break open the whole bloody packet? It might be a whole packet, this one. Quick disclaimer before I ask you a question or two. I embrace tech. This is my disclaimer. That's a statement. It's good. It's good for me. It's good for our evolution. I mean that in evolutionary terms, in context of humans and of tech. You know, my dad passed on but 5 years before a small box could tell you how many lefts, rights and make illegal U-turns you would need to make a journey. He would have been fascinated that by that bit of tech that could replace his legendary experience. In my eyes, that was to be able to drive anywhere in the UK, anywhere. He'd just look at a map at the breakfast table. He'd put the map back in its holder. He'd say, right, I think I could do this. 7.5 hours later, we'd be somewhere in Scotland. Dad, how did you do that? That's magic, that is. So he would have been fascinated by sat-nav. And I do use the sky masking tool in Lightroom, which is AI. There are people alive today who otherwise wouldn't be because of, well, digital evolution in operating theatres. I am not a Luddite who believes we should still be slopping out bedpans over an Elizabethan street in York down onto those hauling carts of unpasteurised dairy product below. No, I'm not. Which may conflict slightly with what I'm about to say. And I'm sure you, because you're very good at stuff like this, may well have something to write in about and answer the questions or the thoughts I'm about to make. So there, I've done my disclaimer. Let's have the questions. Do you remember when this podcast was called Photography Daily? When it was me in a studio doing the interview, sort of staple diet of podcasting stuff. And then, because a guest failed to show once, slightly frustrated, I went on a walk with my microphone and camera, plus some thoughts that were scribbled out onto a few shreds of paper, which then sort of chiselled through the stone of format and morphed into what this is now, which meant that we changed the name and the show to become The Photowalk, because that's what it is. It's you and I out on a walk making some pictures. Sure, we have guests, and we do Zoom through to the guests, sometimes lucky enough to walk with the guests, but it's a show about texture, and it's a show about you. And by the way, I don't think you'll ever truly appreciate just how precious your, I know they're emails, but I call them letters, your letters are. They're the glue that keeps the heel attached to my walking boot. A clumsy metaphor stroke analogy may be, but I'm sure you know what I mean. And the thing I really am, overused word alert required now, the thing I'm really passionate about, the thing I believe most in, is that this evolving thing, this podcast, this programme, whatever you call it, where we share time, not simply in Q&A time, has become something that we spend together in experiential mode. The footsteps in the grass that you hear, the water babbling through the brook, the wind that you can hear through the trees, because the wind's getting up now as well. We've got everything. We've got wind, we've got rain. What is this? It's almost May. But all those sounds, the birds in the trees, those annoying private planes that buzz us mid-sentence, it's all about texture. And I like to think that texture is authentic. It's an authentic feeling. It's real. We're in the wider world together. And I know you don't listen, all of you listen whilst out on walks, I'm aware of that. I love in particular the letters I get from those who can't take a photo walk for whatever reason, but then you say, well, I feel I'm on one because you're taking me through the countryside. I love those sort of letters. I got something sent to me the other day, and this is the heart of the matter at the start of the show today, from my good friend Mally Davis. You know, Mally of the Trees. Sir Mally of the Trees. It was on Messenger and it simply said the word bonkers, followed by a link to a film, a Facebook short where three blokes, it sounds like the start of a three blokes were down the pub joke, doesn't it? But three blokes were showing how AI is assisting and, or, sometimes replacing creatives in our endeavours to do everything from photography to filmmaking to script writing to poetry to podcast making to radio presenting and even recipes for chefs. I mean, though that wasn't in this particular film, that's something I've read about only in the last couple of days. Chefs, watch out. You're not immune either to this. One of the tools that these blokes were using, they were making a podcast, was a voice app, which can be trained to learn a voice, after which you simply type in your script and it will present the programme as that person. Now, part of me is rather terrified by that. And I think my lowercase t is definitely morphing to become a capitalised one now. Because whereas once I would have said, no, come on, really? They'll never be able to do X. Right now, my X, if I'd have said, no, they'll never be able to do X, my X at the moment, my belief is that AI can't do nuance. Sure, it can read a sentence, yes, but can AI weave that sentence to become nuanced with emotion? I'm making like fish moving shapes. Can it weave? Can it bend with conversation? Can it inject sadness, hope, dejection, seriousness, and 100 other emotions? Well, it probably can, yes, if you tell it to. But can it do all four things within one paragraph, where the absolute nuance of conversation, because this is what you and I do with conversation when we talk to each other or we talk to friends, talk to family, we twist and we turn, don't we? I'm doing it right now. I've got thoughts written down here that I want to say to you, but I'm changing my mind as I go along. Sometimes speeding it up, sometimes slowing it down, changing my intonation. Can it do that? Can it make it up as you go along? Unexpectedly changing the mood and the temperament, the speed and the pitch. Can it do that? I don't think it can at the moment. Because, well, it isn't touchy-feely. It's not real. You can't touch it. And I think, AI in terms of podcasting, in terms of speaking for me, it's got all the nuance turning circle of a Frisian cow. Anyway, in this film, they link to another app which boasts that you'll never make another mistake again. You'll never hear an or an R, or what's cruelly sometimes referred to as a vocal tick. You know, when people say, well, I've just done it myself, when people say, you know, or I mean, or like. They're not vocal ticks, it's what makes us human, isn't it? Who wants perfection? Apart from my other listener, of course, who's probably counting down the days until I'm replaced by AI Morgan Freeman taking a stroll in Berkshire countryside reading your letters. But no, who wants perfection? I want touchy-feely things. I love tangible things. I love hold it in your hands, real, feel it, touch it, hear it, taste it, experiences. That's what I want. And whilst, I suppose, bringing it back to the podcast for a second, I could cheat and inject sounds. I don't. I mean, sometimes you'll hear birds tweeting. Today it's raining. They've all gone off somewhere. We've gone down the pub, Neil. See you later. Enjoy your walk. No, it's real. You'll hear wind. Maybe some birds a bit further up as we get close to the woodland. In the very distance, there was a train's horn then, but that might have been too low to have heard it. Because I don't want things to be clinical. I like fallible things. I like making mistakes. Being human is award-winning. And as for touchy-feely, tangible experiences, well, that's what today's show is about, in part. There's a bit of it running through, I think, most, if not all, the letters, and certainly the guests today, because I'm going to talk to 3 guests about a book project, and you can't get much more tangible and human invested than that. 2 publishers and 1 contributor to a book called Literal, which I want to celebrate for the way it embraces all that's good about the hold-it-in-your-hand aspect of creating above swiping right into the never-ending digital avenue. People who understand making something by hand, seeing something with their own eyes, and sending it to people not through the impersonal ether, but through the post.
Today on the Photowalk.
It's fantastic when you see a work published, but to think somebody's bought it, I think they got a real buzz out of it.
The brief was very, very wide. Literally, it was the coast and black and white, and then the rest was just left to us.
The overall effect of having real life people and their emotions and their thoughts and their processes produce work, whether it's the actual photographs or the writing, certainly adds something which at this point cannot be matched by AI.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today we're joined as you and I walk by book curators and publishers Paul Gotts and John Ash, and extra miler and photographer Lynn Fraser, in a show that's written by you from the letters, the thoughts, the pictures that you've shared with me. Everyone is a photographer on this walk, whatever camera you use, and that includes the not-so-humble smartphone, because this is a show about how taking and making photos has you feel, what it does for us, and others around us will be inspired as we walk by words from other picture makers and adventurers with a camera, past and present. In the mailbag today and on the show, finding photography again after COVID took away the love. That dust in your eye you sometimes get when you're making pictures. You mean tears, Neil? Well, maybe. We also talk about the moon and why on some phones it's becoming, well, impressively detailed. Is that possible? Also, we're chasing eclipses with that story. And there's a why story which I know you'll love and find solace in. So much to talk about. Nearly 7 billion people on this planet are able to make a photograph with something and record life. So we're not walking alone, documenting our place and time on this planet. Checklist out. Have you got your coffee and Garibaldi's? That's very important. Check. Walking boots. Check. Laura Ashley notebook and pen. What, Neil? Laura Ashley notebook and pen? That's the most left field one you've put in the checklist to date. Well, there'll be a reason for it later. Have you got it? No. Okay. Well, let's start the walk. On this particular walk that I take, I have a favourite tree. It's not a Mallee's tree. 2 mentions in 1 week, Mallee. I'll send you the bill. No, it's not a Mallee's tree. It looks like it looks like it's burned in some respects, perhaps fallen from this tree up there, but I can't see where. There's a couple of trees around me, so it's a spread of branches, but they're like, I don't know, flowing locks of hair. It's a wonderful tree, or branches, I suppose. Let me get a picture. Manually focusing today because I'm on my my Yashica lens, which is hard to do at the same time as holding a microphone, but I'll do my best. Right, flowing locks of hair. One more of those. F what are we? F 2.8. I've had to open a bit. It's a bit dark. It's chilly and dark. Have you got songs you can sing to that as well, Neil? I don't know. Give me a second. I'll come up with one. I'm going to start this week. We're back in the mailbag this week. Delighted to receive your letters. Thank you so much. We have got quite a full mailbag to start reading through over the next few months, that's for sure. But don't stop sending in your letters. They're really important. They fuel the show, as I say. But I'm going to start with a wonderful story from Lance Carter. And there is a picture to go with this, which I'm going to put on the show page today. There's a good few bits to read through on the show page, some links to previous shows which will be relevant when I talk about certain things later on, and pictures, of course, and some films today to watch through as well. So there's a picture to go with this letter which I'll put on the show page. Lance, this really does say everything about the why of this show in terms of the story you've told and I'm about to read from your pen. And after this story, I thought I'd share something personal of my own, really, in terms of, well, it links with the environment in which you made the picture I'm about to talk about. It's not a competition, by the way, in what moves somebody the most. And as I started to note some thoughts down, it was last night when I was noting this, following reading your letter a couple of times, I thought, oh no, Lance is going to think I'm trying to start a competition, and I'm not. But you did remind me of something which I want to share. Anyway, your letter. Hello, Neil. Love the podcast. Helps me through my day, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you. I wanted to share a story with you about how I lost my passion for photography in 2020 due to the pandemic, and how I eventually rediscovered it again. As a part-time photographer with a growing business, I'm going to have to say this word and a number, bear with me. COVID-19 had a significant impact on my work. The pandemic forced me to halt my photography business, which was incredibly disheartening, I can imagine. And as a result, I struggled to find motivation and inspiration to pick up my camera, and my passion for photography dwindled with it. Lance, we were only talking about this on the Extra Mile number 34. The latest one. I started to share that I thought and you'll hear more about this on the Extra Mile, but I started to share that I thought my own photography business was suffering a kind of business long COVID, as I've heard it described, but that's on the Extra Mile. Lance says, during Holy Week of 2021, the church I attend, a traditional Latin Mass parish, sounds very exotic actually, that, asked me to help do some photography for them. Now, I was thrilled to be asked, and I thought, yeah, why not? I'll have a go. During the Tenebrae ceremony, which takes place in darkness and symbolises the death of Christ, I was struck by the beauty of this amazing ceremony. Blimey, Lance, I tell you what, that sounds very deep, very spiritual, very experiential, which could well be the word of the week. The dimly lit candles, writes Lance, the intricate details of the altar, and the expressions on the faces of the congregants all combined to create an atmosphere of reverence and awe. The Scholar, a choir that specialises in singing Gregorian chant, I do hope I pronounced that correctly because I didn't check that one. Is it Scholar? I think it is Scholar, isn't it? Provided a beautiful soundtrack, and it filled the air with this solemnity. I slowly began to take some photographs of the ceremony. And with each shot, I found myself lost in the moment, lost again in my love for photography. It was like something inside me that day, that night, clicked. And I was finally able to reconnect with my passion for photography. Later that night, as I reviewed the photos I took, I felt a sense of joy and fulfillment that I hadn't experienced in months. The beauty, the sound of that ceremony had rekindled my love for photography, and I realised just how much I'd been missing it. Well, since then, I've photographed Holy Week again for the church, starting with Tenebrae, and the experience of capturing the beauty of these ceremonies, accompanied by the Scholar's hauntingly beautiful chants, has brought me closer to my faith and has helped me appreciate the power of photographing to communicate emotion and meaning. I'm attaching an image of the Tenebrae ceremony to this email. I hope it gives you a glimpse of the beauty I witnessed and helps you to convey the emotions that I experienced during that moment. Well, it does. It does. And I've put it on the show page today. And thank you very much for that mail. Lance finishes by saying, I hope it serves as a reminder that even in challenging times, we can rediscover our passions and find joy in the beauty all around us. Keep doing what you're doing. From Lance Carter. Thank you, Lance. I appreciate your mail and your candour. And it did remind me of something that I thought, well, I'll share it. It's a bit, well, I'll not blather. Oh, that was the other thing, by the way, that I forgot to mention that. The video about AI said, no longer will anybody blather. And I thought, what? No human blathering? Surely not. Anyway, sorry, Lance. Yeah, years ago, and we're talking BC, before COVID, I was asked to photograph a wedding in London's Temple Church, which is the historic spiritual home of the Knights Templar, the final resting place of the crusading knights. And if you've watched the Da Vinci Code, that amazing film, incredible film, you'll know this church because it features within the movie a very important moment. I tell you what, I'll note to self now. Remember, Neil, back in studio, that one that's in the warm now, not in the rain. Yeah, you. Remember to put up one, possibly two films, some bits from the Da Vinci Code, if they exist online. I'm sure they will. But yeah, it's a very, very special church. And I did look it up because I thought, who can get married in the church? Because I don't think just anybody can. Not just anybody like me. I wouldn't stand a chance. And there are some fairly strict rules. Get these. There are three. 1, either the bride or groom is a member of Inner or of Middle Temple. Or 2, either the bride or the groom is a child of a member of Inner or of Middle Temple. Or 3, either the bride or groom is a grandchild of a bencher of Inner or of Middle Temple. See? None of those. I can't claim one single one of those. It's a good job that myself and Sam quite like St Mary's Church. in deepest Berkshire land. Suffice to say, this is one of those deep English traditional things that's all tied up in history and monarchy, I think, and bar and wigs and stuff like that. A place that may chortle non-politely of the likes of ruffians like what I is asked to get married there. But photography being the great enabler, and I think Lance has certainly underlined this to an extent. It's an enabler in all kinds of ways. It's an enabler mentally, and for me, it was definitely an enabler in a physical sense. I could get into this church and photograph. So there I am in this magnificent place, full of majesty, beauty, and I'm there, standing there in my freshly pressed TK Maxx suit, and I'm up near the altar, next to the most incredible stained glass window you can imagine in one of the very few medieval churches of any kind left, I think. It survived. I checked the history. I don't know this off by heart, but it did survive the Great Fire of London, which was 1666, and the Blitz during the Second World War. It survived both those events. But I'm under these strict wander instructions. My card has been firmly marked. You can stand near the choir and just in front of the orchestra, and then when the procession was past, you must goeth to the backeth. Okayeth, I will behaveth myselfeth. Now, I was told the choir was something special, but nothing could quite prepare me for what might happen next under the hallowed roof of this church. Have I sung its praise enough yet? I probably have. There were these musicians, there was this choir, an orchestra in a church? Really? It felt like there was more orchestra and more choir than there were guests. The processional was, that's the music that the bride comes. Oh, I know that, Neil. Well, I'm just saying it for my other listener. That's the music that the bride or the groom process down the aisle to. And it was Handel's Zadok the Priest, which Philistine me at the time. This all went a little bit over my head, and I can share that with you because it's you and I don't feel too embarrassed about it. But it is a coronation classic. It was written for, George II? Pretty sure. It is, I think, being played and sung at the coronation coming up of Charles II. Oh, I hope I read that correctly as well. Anyway, look, it's a very famous piece of music. Some will even point to it's the music in the Champions League TV sports shows, which Tony Britton, the composer, back in the 90s, he did base it on Zadok. But I must have stood there, camera around my shoulder, with my usual resting face of utter confusion. I think I was the only one who probably looked a bit whimsy as this church of hundreds went quiet, because, well, I'm sure they knew what was coming. This, sir, whispered the sergeant at arms, who was positioned to make sure I behaved myself. Yes. Really, this is going to blow your socks off. Get ready to grab your tissues. You'll need it. You'll be shedding buckets of tears. Yeah, right, I thought. We'll see about that. Now, you know me. We've gotten to know each other reasonably well now. And if you're new around here, I'll just say it so you know it for the future. I am a right old softy, me. And music does bring a massive lump to my throat. I'd be lying if I didn't admit to getting a little bit choked when seeing the reaction to couples having a first glimpse along the aisle. But I'm not really moved by music at weddings, which I know sounds a bit strange, seeing that I do get easily moved by music. But you're talking to a man who stood stage right watching Robbie Williams sing Angels at Wembley, right underneath the mother of all speaker systems. That kind of sound that sort of goes into you, comes out the other side, then comes back again and kicks you up the backside. Robbie, you had me at I sit and wait. But I'm moved by that, yes. I found some dust in my eye on that occasion. I'm very, very lucky, I appreciate this, that I watched Tosca at Sydney's Opera House. Beautiful. Oh, And I tell you what, there's a lot of dust that gets in your eye in Sydney's Opera House. And then I'll never forget watching Spielberg's incredibly moving Schindler's List in the cinema for the first time. The I didn't do enough scene, gets me every time. But then Jerusalem of Gold, that beautiful yet haunting music at the very end, just prior to the stone placing scene. When I watched that in the cinema, honestly, I was done. I was definitely last out the cinema that day. No, I need to stay just a little bit longer. You all go. But processional music, it doesn't usually get me. But Zadok, now, the introductory lead-in is soft at first. It builds, and to be fair, it's very good at persuading your senses that something might be just about to happen. It has a very heralding nature to it. And as everybody stood for the bride and the doors opened, in a scene of choreography I'd previously not witnessed in 400-500 weddings at that stage, I couldn't have imagined the sheer weight the choir finding their voice would have on me. So these doors opened, the lights seemed to cinematically snake and burst along the church, along and up through the nave. The bride was silhouetted too against this light as those doors opened, and she with her father started to process into the church, all eyes firmly fixed upon their slow but confident arrival. I saw the groom turn. I remember that. My word, you couldn't get any more film script. The drama was intensifying with every single step, it seemed, as they made their processional walk. Just at the stage where they start to pass through the congregation, I raised my camera and then completely faltered as this happened. I tell you what, there was a lot of dust in that church. I hope you don't mind me recounting that story. I'm very aware I didn't feel like I wanted to hijack your story before, but you did remind me of something. And we are talking about texture, and we are talking about experience today, aren't we? There's a film I found on YouTube, by the way, which I shall put on the show page. It's of an orchestra in the Netherlands playing John Williams' Schindler's List, which is, I think you get my enthusiasm for it, which is just the most exquisite composition. It really is. Probably one of Williams' finest, I think. And that's quite a statement when you think about John Williams and his career in music. But the story behind the concert that night is so special, this Netherlands concert. It's why I want to share it with you. It features in particular Simone Lamsma, who's on violin, a very important instrument to that piece of music, the theme from Schindler's List, but also Davida Scheffers, who is on cor anglais, which is an instrument belonging to the oboe family. Yes, I did need to look that up. Now, Davida Scheffers won this contest and the opportunity to play with the Dutch National Orchestra. That you might think is story enough, and it probably is. But when you add to that Davida suffers from an extremely painful neuromuscular condition that entirely derailed her music career, you learn that she felt she'd never get to play in a professional orchestra ever again until this one night. And what unfolds in this film that I'm going to put on the show page for you, had me watch that film over and over since I found it. It's we love stories on this show, don't we? And it's a story of courage and a story of undeniable beauty, a story of devotion, for which that word links wonderfully with a very important side note, that the young lady that the cameras find in the audience is Davida's daughter. and she was celebrating her 18th birthday in that day, and it's such a beautiful legacy film. There we go, AI. Try and get emotional about that. Oh. It's quite the piece, though, and if, like me, and remember these numbers, 3 minutes and 27 seconds in, you'll find something, I think, additional about life and art in this film. The film's nearly 5 minutes long, but there's this particular part. You know, it's just incredible, and for fear of going on about the film, I just want you to watch it. My mum at this stage would say something like, "Right, you are then. I'll leave it with you. Move along." So I'll get back to your letters, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about that particular film if and when you go to the show page. Here's one from Peter Foot. Peter, thank you for your letter. Now, you may know this. I didn't when Peter sent me the letter, but subsequently I have read about it. This letter's the best part of a month old. That's why I think you may know about it. But having said that, I read it to Sam. I read a lot of your letters to Sam, you know. I really do. And she raised an eyebrow and said, "What? Really? No." So, and Sam's, I like to think, pretty well read, keeps up with current affairs. So from Peter, if you take a picture of the moon on a Samsung smartphone. Now, I don't have a Samsung smartphone, so if you have one, you can fill in the blanks for me on this one. You might be pleasantly surprised at your own ability to capture the moon's finer details from 239,000 miles away. But photography aficionados suspected that Samsung may be using, here comes that word, or words, artificial intelligence, AI, to enhance users' photographs of this celestial body. Earlier this month, says Peter, a post on internet forum Reddit brought this trickery into the public light, and it asked the question, was one of the world's biggest mobile phone designers using computer fakery to secretly insert high-resolution detail into people's nighttime snaps of the moon? Well, Peter, I was fascinated by this, and I did go and look it up. There's a rabbit hole of information and stories, even some YouTube films about this from very well-respected tech YouTubers. And, well, frankly, it did get quite tech. So, you know me, I got a nosebleed. But the idea that the moon detail can have that much resolution within a photograph taken on a smartphone, of whatever zoom capability, you can put whatever lens you like on a smartphone, but it does seem a little bit far-fetched, doesn't it? Oh, look at that detail. What, you got that from the moon on the phone? Phew, that is some phone. Yes, I do get that. But is it a picture of the moon that's being cleverly overlaid on the moon when you take a picture of the moon with a Samsung phone? Would it be clever enough that sometimes it would recognise that there's things that might be obscuring the moon? Because that is clever. If AI is doing that, that's it. I'm getting my coat. But yeah, so it's a fascinating story. And Samsung, well, as you can imagine, nobody's saying yes and nobody's saying no, but they're using a lot of jargon. And when marketing companies, it is the marketeer behind Samsung, starts using sentences with words of 7 syllables or more, plus they speak in the kind of riddles you usually only find on those little white plaques next to unreasonably abstract modern art installations, when they start doing that, you know something's not quite right. It says to me that the man in the moon's portrait is perhaps not all it seems, IMHO, as corporate people say in emails when trying to win an email argument with fake humility. So it's not really a watch this space thing. You can go and read about this. Just do a Google search. I'll note to self again, put a couple of links in and you can go and read or see about this, because it is an interesting story. Just another AI thing creeping in. This time last year, were we talking about AI? No, we weren't. It seems to have, and we knew it existed, but it's suddenly making its presence ominously felt, isn't it? Anyway, I tell you one person who's made pictures of the moon for real. Astrophotographer John Carmichael That's who. He was on in episode 282. And it was a really interesting episode. I loved talking with John, a man of much inspiration, but also muchos enthusiasmos. He was probably one of the most enthusiastic guests we've ever had on, with no disrespect meant to anybody else. But if you remember that episode, you'll know what I mean by that. But in that particular edition, and I want to play a piece to you now. It's our first inspirational clip of the day. In that interview that I had with him, he talked about his race to make pictures of a very special eclipse. It was a moon shadow chase from an airliner, making pictures out of an airliner of the moon's shadow and this eclipse. Oh, it's a phenomenal picture. I'll link to it, of course. He called it the most important photographic story of his life, one that he almost didn't achieve. You'll have to hear the whole episode to understand why. It was a wonderful story of endeavour. And it was, and I think he'll admit this, no, I know he'll admit this, sprinkled in places with a touch of luck, because that's a vital ingredient. That's a very human ingredient as well.
We climb up, we go to 35,000 feet, and we're about 5 or 10 minutes from totality, and the moon is getting closer and closer in. The sun is now looking like it's a crescent moon. And, everybody's kind of getting excited. The sky is getting a little bit darker. It was very cool. All of a sudden, the pilot, his name's Jeffrey Jackson, by the way, Captain Jackson. He says, he comes on to the PA system. He's like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about 5 minutes away from totality. I'm going to do what's called an S-turn maneuver. And I'm like, he's going to do it.
He's going to do it.
Oh my God, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to give you all a heads up, to show you ahead of time, what to expect. And I'm going to do the same thing once we're in totality. So he banks the plane to the left and to the right. And I'm sweating and shaking, and I have 3 cameras here, and I'm just trying to get all my settings right. I'm doing 7 to 9 bracketed exposures for each image. I spent a lot of money on the fastest memory cards possible, and my goal was just to get all the data in, right? So I'm trying to get all these practice shots in, and I immediately realize he's not turning the plane wide enough. I'm not getting enough of the earth in. And also the eclipse is too high up, and it's getting warped from all the layers of plastic in the airplane window. I have to shoot straight out the window. I can't angle it, otherwise it gets all messed up. Obviously, it's out of my hands now. There's nothing I can do, right? So all of a sudden, the flight attendants, there's 2 flight attendants sitting right in front of me in the jump seat, facing me, because I'm in the front row. They get a call from the captain, and she says, John, the captain wants to know, how was that turn? I was like, are you kidding me? This literally is my own private chartered jet now. I said, well, since he's asking, it wasn't good enough. He said it's not good enough. He needs a steeper turn, and blah, blah, blah. And so he gets on the fly, no pun intended, he gets approval by the FAA, and he climbs up another 4,000 feet to 39,000 feet. And he ends up turning the plane around 5 different times while the moon's shadow is passing over us.
The rain is beginning to fall properly now. I'm going to be a bit wet when I return to car. Oh, don't you think you're stepping in here with your wet clothes on? Don't worry, car. Well, I don't have a change of clothes, but I do have a change of boots. So you'll be all right. Good. Right. Oh, thanks to John Carmichael. And I will link to the full episode. It's a great story. If you haven't heard it, make sure you listen, because it's an incredible story. Time to introduce my first 2 guests. John Ash, a photographer with a love for landscapes. Moreover, for the context of this chat, a love for photo books. Real, hold it in your hands, feel it, smell it, paper, photo books. And with John is Paul Gotts. Now, they've been producing photo books in the UK. They're both photographers, and both extremely passionate about books, and they print their own. They make handmade books, and that sounds very artisan, doesn't it? Well, it is handmade books. It makes it sound, and it is very special. And they've been producing photo books in the UK, which you can buy internationally, for a number of years, collaborating together to celebrate the work of print. Now, they have a new book out that I learned about a couple of weeks ago, which I will link to in the show notes. It's called Literal, the meaning of which John and Paul can explain. 3 photographers who've made pictures for a book that's also accompanied by words from a very talented writer, who you'll hear about as the conversation progresses. And later on in the programme, Lynn Fraser's going to talk about, because she's one of our special friends and an extra miler, she's going to talk about her part in the book, because she's one of the 3 photographers who took part in Literal. I'm very lucky to sit in a studio that's surrounded by inspiration in the form of books, a wholesome library of books that bring me all manner of topics, from war to weddings, yes, beautiful astro books, books of history, books of far-off places that I may or may never, ever get to see with my own eyes, but they are my guide. Books from those who spend every waking hour enveloped by landscapes and seascapes, and books of poetry. Books that my dad read, my mum and dad read to me. Books that I was read as a child that explained why being adopted didn't make me any less special. Those sort of books as well. There's journals in there, not just my journals. I've collected a few journals that either have significance or I find just extremely inspirational stories. Books and books and books and books. Do you get this idea that we're celebrating books today? I think so. We're celebrating making your own books, and we're enjoying the work of those who show us what an incredible world we live in. And we're going to do that by talking today to some guests about a new book. How many more times can I say book in a few minutes that's coming out? One called Literal, with John Ash and Paul Gotts. I'm personally fascinated in the tangible, the things that we hold in our hands that have value beyond the zeros and ones. And it was one of our great friends of the show, Lynn Fraser, who's featured as a photographer within your latest book, who made me aware of the project called Literal. But this is not the first. You have track record together, you two. Tell me about the collaborations. Paul, if I can ask you first, tell me about the collaborations that you've both had before.
Well, this started about 4 years ago in 2019. After talking to a photographer colleague, I came up with, I quite like the idea of inviting maybe half a dozen people to submit half a dozen images each and bring that together as a cohesive book and sell it as cheaply as we could. At the time, it was £5 for a copy. That was successful. And John was, I think, the first person invited to be part of it. John was one of the first photographers. So that's when we started working together.
John, what's the magic of a book? Why is it important for readers to hold a book and to experience a book? And actually, why is it important to you? Because you don't set out to do a project unless you have some kind of personal investment in it. And I don't mean necessarily money. I mean something like an emotional or mental investment.
For me, the benefit of the book is, one, bringing together a body of work, whether that's from a single photographer or, as in this case, 3 photographers. Also having something real, and coming back to your introduction, something tangible, something you can hold in your hand, something that then becomes or adds to the actual photography and the work itself. But we wanted this one to be another step up as far as production quality is concerned in the paper we used.
You first met Paul, as he suggested, when you worked on your first collaboration rather. At that time, had you produced books before? Were books something a feature in your life as a photographer, or was it one of those things you thought, well, one day I'd like to make a book, but it seems just too much a mountain to climb? I
don't even think I got as far as the one day bit in my head, to be honest. I think from the meeting with Paul 4 or 5 years ago to now, that's been really instrumental in how personally I've changed with my own photography and my thoughts about photo books. I always liked photo books, but never thought that I could ever. It wasn't even on the radar that I could be in a book or produce a book of my own work. What it opened my eyes to with the meeting for Paul is the way of making zines and using some of the printing services that are available today to produce work and get it out there, and that it didn't have to be a big glossy coffee table book that costs tens of pounds or hundreds of pounds, and certainly thousands of pounds to produce.
Paul, John has made a really good point there, actually, that I think it's very easy to think, right, a photo book is one thing. It's that great big book that's behind me that probably has Century written down the spine. Huge, great big affair that must have cost tens of thousands to publish, to distribute, and so on and so forth. And Sean Tucker, actually, who we were speaking to on the programme last week, his publishing has changed. He's a reasonably leading YouTube figure in photographic circles, and he's gone from producing a book to producing a zine. And I wonder about the book industry at the moment, and in particular photo books. What's the likelihood of getting your ideas published if you don't self-publish and you don't produce a zine?
Good question. I think it's, unless you are a major figure in the landscape photography world, say a Joe Cornish figure, I think it's virtually impossible. I don't see why anybody would take the risk. You know, in this book, when we started out last year, I made some tentative inquiries about 3 or 4 different publishers, and looked online, rang them up, emailed them, sent them samples, and didn't get a jot of interest.
None at all?
No, absolutely none. I don't think. And, we've, the photographers, John and I, and 1 or 2 others, have spent a massive amount of time in the last couple of months just selling the pre-orders for this one. And that's a massive task. We thought we had 1 or 2 positive leads with major artistic organisations and thought this could be a game changer, but it hasn't been. I think it's incredibly hard, and anybody doing it from a commercial angle for the likes of me I just can't see it happening now or ever, really.
It's probably a very difficult question to answer, Paul, but I want you to put yourself in the shoes of those that you've given an opportunity to, whose work you've published. I wonder what it does for them. I know they're not here to individually answer each of them, and you've worked with quite a few photographers now across these projects. What does it do for them, do you think, to have their work published in a book, to see it, to hold it?
Well, there's 21 of them now. I was counting up. And we still aim to attract people who haven't been published in a major way before. But we have been on at least 2 of the other collaborations. We've had similar podcasts and meetings and Zoom things. And they all seem, they're thrilled to bits that they've had the opportunity. No photographer has volunteered to do it or we've asked to do it has let us down. So I judge that to be something's working.
Yeah.
The produced work, I think they've enjoyed that. They've enjoyed the fact that we've given them a specific brief, like take some photographs in black and white, this time to Lynn, for example, in 8 weeks, after 8 weeks, we want you to produce 20 black and white images around a literal theme. And bear in mind, we are going to probably cut them down to 9, 10, 11. And bear in mind, we're going to merge them with 2 other photographers' work who you possibly don't even know the photographer. And we're going to add in some words from a writer you don't know. And I think if I was the photographer, I'd think, oh my word, this is pressure. And I think they have experienced that, but genuinely, I think they've all enjoyed that. And I think it's worked for them. I think they've been petrified at various stages, but they've come up with the work on time as asked, and they've seen the work published, and it's fantastic when you see a work published. But to think somebody's bought it, I think they got a real buzz out of it.
I would imagine it's a great life thing for photographers. John, you'll know this, being a photographer, to be able to see your work in print. Well, let's take literal though, because you might be thinking of it spelt one way when it's spelled Littoral, relating to or situated on the shore of the sea or a lake. I did look it up. Who came up with the idea, and how did you approach each of these 3 photographers? There are less than you usually have in a book, but why literal?
Even though literal, as what I had to look up when I first heard it as well, was very much Paul's idea for the title. I think we were looking for a theme for this. The previous books that we've done have all been based around song lyrics and song titles, typically. But given that this was going to be a kind of major departure from the past, we thought we'd get away from that as well and hopefully put something that a little bit different. We thought the coast and the sea was a big enough theme to give people rein to do all kinds of different things. And we wanted fewer photographers than normal doing more pictures. And rather than it being almost a small portfolio from 6 different photographers, just to mix it all in. So making it black and white, we thought would give us more opportunity to do that and make it easier, certainly to blend them together.
I had a wonderful conversation this week on the Extra Mile edition with a photographer who's made a fabulous book about the 2 places he lives in, Nova Scotia and Aruba. He's effectively, I suppose, made a love letter to these places in the book that he's produced. But he also has haiku poetry within the book on each page, which is wonderful. You'd love it, I know. You've gone for text as well to accompany the pictures. Jeff Young wrote the words. And I know those words relate to the pictures from photographers he'd never met, and pictures at one stage he'd not even seen. I'm interested to know why you chose this particular writer to, if you like, narrate the pictures, to bring a text edge to the work as well. Why Jeff Young in particular?
I've just moved from Liverpool. I've lived there for 40 years. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I picked up a book called Ghost Town, published by Little Toller down in Dorset, written by this guy, Jeff Young from Liverpool. So I sort of picked it up on the basis that, he'd be talking about, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, all the old hackneyed stuff. And the book just blew my mind because it was about his personal reminiscence of walking around Liverpool with his mum 40 years ago. And then walking around Liverpool now and remembering these things. And Liverpool's a really emotionally charged place. I love Liverpool. I thought his work, I loved reading it. And then when we thought about this idea of somebody who might, a proper writer who might link the words, I just tweeted Jeff Young. And to be able to tweet an author and get in direct contact with them personally was a game changer, because within half an hour of a tweet to the world about Jeff Young, he was sending me a direct message through Twitter saying, yeah, I'd quite like to be involved. So I said to Jeff, do you want to see the photographs? Oh, yes. I said, I could send you a PDF or a hard copy. So he asked for a hard copy. So, I had to print it all out, sent it up to Liverpool. And 3 weeks or so after, he sent us back nearly 1,000 words of text, which just blew my mind. It related to the photographs, which was really heartening for me, because we'd set ourselves what we think were real big objectives, bringing 3 photographers together to put their work in, to be edited, to be brought in a completely different sequence, and then pass over that work to us with no questions asked, and then to ask a writer who we'd never met before, still haven't met, to put something together. And in real, when you see it all together, it really sort of put shivers up my spine, really, because the photographs and the words, the first time it all came together, it was like brought tears to my eyes. The words are just magical. They're a real magical piece of work next to some really good photography. We're thrilled a bit.
And there's another figurehead, John, that's involved in this. Somebody else we know well on this show, actually, Jack Lowe. There's a lifeboat connection here. Well, there's a water connection here, of course, because Jack's been doing this fabulous project going around the country photographing all the lifeboat stations in the UK. I don't know whether he's near actually finishing that. How did you get involved with Jack? Did you both know him before, or was his project something that you were both aware of?
I've certainly been aware of Jack's project for a number of years. We saw a presentation he gave at the local camera club in Harrogate a number of years ago, and I was just blown away by A, what he was doing, and B, the actual photography itself. I think it's absolutely amazing. He gets embarrassed, but he comes down. He's basically my most favourite photographer at the moment with the work he does. I think it's just incredible. We wanted to bring someone else in to write the forward, who I guess would have a certain interest in what we did, but also give us access on a commercial side to an audience which will also be engaged in what we were trying to do. As we've chosen the RNLI as the charity for any profits to go to, obviously knowing Jack's linked with that, I just approached Jack directly, just like we did with Jeff, but I did it through Jack's app that he runs for the Lifeboat Station project. Again, just asking whether he'd be interested in doing it, thinking he probably gets far too many of these and he'd be far too busy. Like Jeff, he came back quite quickly with an interest, asked to see the work we'd done before, and after seeing that, was straight on board, and has written a lovely forward for the book as well. So we're well chuffed. We couldn't have chosen better, I think, for this particular book.
I'm interested in this making a photo book workshop that you both run together, Paul and John. Paul, perhaps you'd like to tell me about this. I love the side of making 4-sided Japanese slipcases. That sounds very exotic to me. But making handmade books, artisan stuff, that's right up my street, to be honest. If somebody said, you can have a can of Foster's or this artisan one over here, no idea what it's like. I know which one I'm choosing.
Yeah, same here.
Tell me about making books and why you started the workshops to teach people how to make their own books.
Yeah. I've always loved books and I love photography. And to me, that meant I had to make some books with my photographs in. So... I don't know when, 7 years ago, I went on a workshop with Joseph Wright, big photographer, bookmaker, brilliant guy. And it was just a brilliant workshop. So it started from there, and I started making some simple Japanese stab-bound ones, made loads of mistakes, as you do. And then slowly you acquire more and more equipment, and you start looking at books that you like and think, oh, how can I copy that? And then you start talking to your mates. So I started talking to John about handmade books. And then John said, oh, could you show me how to do one? So, a month later, he's over in Liverpool and I'm showing him how to make a concertina book, I think it was, John. We give them the specifications of how to print off their own work and they bring that work there. Totally non-judgmental. It could be photographs about anything. We're not really bothered. But people bring stunning work, absolutely stunning. And by the end of the day, on the first one, they've got a lovely concertina book and they're pleased as punch when you look at the photographs of how they've been. I think if you take photographs, you like books, you've got reasonable confidence you can cut a bit of card in a straight line without drawing blood. There's millions and millions of photographs on hard drives that will never see the light of day. It's fantastic to see you convert your images into a book you're proud to hold and show.
I was having a chat about AI, John, as the monologue to this show today. You and I and Paul, we frequent a world where experiential, tangible stuff has been and probably will continue to be a really important part of our creative lives, each of us. If the words had been created by AI, would it have had a different feeling to this project? If the pictures have been created by AI, which is frightening that they are, you can do so much more with it now. Would it have sucked the soul from this project?
My personal view is knowing the work's been produced by an individual and it's their reaction and their feelings and their emotion to the situation that they found themselves in and where they went certainly adds something. I guess it's arguable for people who don't know or don't have that kind of connection, as was shown with the guy who won the Sony Award or potentially won the Sony Award. If you're just viewing it as a standalone image, then I guess it can certainly fool people. But I think the overall effect of having real life people and their emotions and their thoughts and their processes produce work, whether it's the actual photographs or the writing, certainly adds something which at this point cannot be matched by AI.
Yeah, I agree with everything John said. I think it's a difficult one. I like to think I'm bright enough to look at a book and think, yeah, I can see somebody's heart and soul in here. It's nice to think the person you're buying the book from. Let's use Jack Lowe as an example because we've referred to him already. If Jack produces a book about his lifeboats, as we all hope he will eventually, you'd think, well, you've got some provenance there that I can fall back on. So the provenance is important to me.
John, that's a good link really to a final question. Perhaps the answer to this question is, that will be Jack Lowe's book then. I guess it's like the Forth Bridge painting project, really. You get to one end of one book and you start over. I imagine you're already starting to think about the next one. That's why I'm wondering whether it could be Jack Lowe.
That would be nice. But yeah, we've been thinking of ideas for our next book. We've got some ideas of a possible topic and theme for it. We will build on what we've done for this book. We've learned a hell of a lot going through this process. In a way, we've set ourselves quite a high bar after doing this. It's very genuine when we had Jeff and Jack doing their bits to add to three great photographers. We're really proud of what we've produced. So to do another one, it's going to be a big ask, and we've set ourselves that's all. We didn't know what we're getting ourselves into with this one because it was a step up and something different. But now we've done it, we will certainly want to do it again. If we could have some involvement in Jack's book in the future, that would be a dream, without a doubt. I think we get a kick out of giving a platform to people who don't really have a platform to produce something that other people like and will spend money on, and will raise a bit of money for charity.
John Ash and Paul Gotts, my thanks to them both for talking to me about this book called Literal. And Lynn Fraser is going to talk more about her part in the book, and she's going to share some pictures which are on the show page today, and the stories behind those pictures. I love stories behind pictures. In a short while on the show. If you've been travelling anywhere, or not necessarily travelling, if you've been making pictures about your life, an event, a person, something in your life that you'd like to share with us, then please, I'd love to hear from you. Write to the email address, which is stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. The pictures you send in, if you can optimise them to 2,500 pixels wide, please, that would be absolutely fantastic. You know what I'm going to say next. Is it, Neil? Don't worry if you can't do that. Send the full resolution ones in and you'll do the heavy lifting work. Oh, you read my mind. So I'd love to hear from you. You really do make this part of the show, the letters with your thoughts and your pictures about where you are in the world. It's fabulous as well to travel to different parts of the globe with you through your pictures and through your words. And for those that don't have pictures or don't feel they want to share them at the moment, and here's an interesting newish thing. Well, not that new, but there's more than one or two other listeners out there now who aren't necessarily photographers. They make pictures, they take pictures, but they're not necessarily photographers. And I really appreciate your thoughts when you've sent them in about how you feel you enjoy the photo walk, even though you're not what you might class or claim to be a photographer. It doesn't matter. It's just good to have you walking along with us, along our paths. There's 2 photo walks a week, actually. There is this one, and there's the one on Wednesdays, which is available to Extra Mile patrons who support the show with a modest monthly or annual donation. Without you, the show wouldn't be what it is, so thank you so much. That's why I do an extra walk a week. And we make it a bit different in that, yes, we have a guest. A guest is a really important part of it. There's normally me walking along the path, reading some of the letters, some of the thoughts you have about the shows. That stays the same. The guests are the extra milers, you. And I thought it was an idea I thought, this could work, and I think it really has worked. So thank you to the extra milers who have taken part so far. And if you would like to, if you're an extra miler and you're thinking, I'd like to do that, I'd like to share, shoot the breeze as we call it, I'd like to share some thoughts about photography, then I'd love to hear from you. But if you'd like to hear the extra mile, then if you go to the website, photowalk.show, you'll see us support the show. Orange badge, top right-hand corner, just up there. Let's not go through that argument of whether it's yellow or orange. I believe it's orange. Click that and it'll take you to where you can join to become one of our patrons and listen to the additional walk.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Yeah, we talk about a wonderful book called Intimate Dawn, A Time of Thoughtful Respite. 25 pictures made in Nova Scotia, 25 pictures made in Aruba. The common factor being an extra miler called Randy Bullerwell, a photographer, a counsellor and now a poet.
Photography has allowed me to explore and answer some of my own questions of why me, and becoming wiser to the fact that, I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to change a thing, although I hope people weren't hurt by my experiences, but I wouldn't want to change a thing. I am who I am today, and I consider myself wiser for all the things that I went through.
Also, last week's guide around the Northeast returns to talk about the beauty of making projects. Paul Hudson.
I lived on a heathland with a strange tower on stilts, and all the time I lived there, I was aged 5 to 9, I got used to this object towering above me. It never knew what the hell it was, never had the common sense to ask my parents, Mummy and Daddy, what's this great huge black tower? It was a water tower. It was an old iron rectangular water tower on huge legs. And the thought occurred to me a few years ago that the landscape is littered with objects that we're very familiar with, like these concrete signs in the ground with an H on. What the hell's that? And then you realise it's a water hydrant.
It's a water hydrant, You can become an extra miler by clicking on the support the show icon, as I say, on the front of the website, photowalk.show. And thank you to all those who are making this show a weekly adventure with our cameras. I'm hoping that long may we walk together.
For quality used and inspected photo and video kit with a 6-month guarantee upon what you buy, visit mpb.com.
Trying to find some tree cover somewhere just to dive in away from the rain for a second. I've given up with the camera. I seem to... where's my cloth? I've got the lens all wet, and I can't seem to... could make an interesting effect, I suppose. Let's have a go. It's like a soft focus effect. Very soft, Neil. Let's have a go. Let's make a sketchbook image. Here we go. Oh, blimey. This could be a whole new genre of photography. The wet lens effect. Never mind intentional camera movement. Wet lens effect. There we go. Let's see what that looks like. Neil, it didn't sound like you put a lot of effort into that one. Oh, I did, honestly. I thought about it for all of a couple of seconds. It's great to be back with your letters and your thoughts following a couple of differently styled specials. Hopefully some more to come this summer in a similar vein. I am talking at the moment. I'm hoping. I stumbled there just a little bit because it's not finally organised yet, but there is still that chance I may go and sleep out on Snowdonia, do a bit of bivouacking with a camera. I haven't even been put off by the offer of going for a morning icy cold swim. So there's all sorts of stuff to come, possibly a reasonably large adventure, winter time, which I can't talk about. Oh, Neil, you tease. Gambia, of course. Inverness, let's not forget Inverness, in September. Very much looking forward to the retreat that's coming up, spending some time with special guests in that house. It's great to be back with your letters. And let's have one from Helen Fennell, who was, she was our winning image from the Tim Booth assignment. Hi, Neil. Hope all is well. Firstly, I was beyond chuffed to have my shot highlighted for the Tim Booth assignment. Well, for very good reason, I might add, Helen. It was a terrific photograph. I'm still pondering the why of photography, she says. The question you do ask of many of your guests. I don't actually ask it this week. Spoiler, I know. But I do. You're absolutely right. I am interested by people's why in life generally. But particularly photographers, their why, their creative why. The question really perplexed me, said Helen, as I thought I understand why I love taking photos so much. But the more I thought about it, the less sure I became. Well, when I've been asked before, I've tried to explain when I have a camera in my hand, my brain forgets all the worries and to-do lists, and I engage directly with a world that's immediately around me. I find it, this is a very good word, Helen, you're right, freeing. Yesterday, I took 3 photographs, which I've sent to you. And I'll put these on the show page, which gave me a completely different perspective. I'm currently staying with my elderly mum in the house I grew up in. And when we moved in, the house needed complete renovation. My dad did all the building work. He tore down some walls, he rewired, he plumbed, he decorated, whilst Mum took on all the interior design. And as you can see from the photos, she was heavily influenced by Laura Ashley, who was all the rage in the 80s. I actually shot a wedding in the house that Bernard Ashley bought with Laura Ashley. It's a beautiful house. It's a hall. It's called Llangoed Hall in Wales. And they bought it as a couple, and the idea was that it was going to become, I think it was going to become their business and home base. And sadly, Laura Ashley passed away before they got to live in it. But it's a celebration of her life, because in Llangoed there's a lot of rooms that are Laura Ashley decorated, most certainly. But it was the rage in the 80s, you're quite right. Anyway, Dad sadly died back in 2008, says Helen. But walking from room to room, I remember him ripping up those floorboards and hanging wallpaper so clearly. The house hasn't changed much since I left home, although everything is a little more faded and a little more worn. A bit like me. Helen's words, not mine. However, yesterday, the light suddenly transported a couple of rooms back 30 years to when I lived there. The first photograph is of a faded sofa in the sun lounge. I remember when Mum chose the flowers and birds fabric, and then the wait until it finally got delivered. Yeah, I remember those waits, in particular for the Encyclopedia Britannica. Nothing came quickly in the 80s, did it? You had to wait. None of this. Oh, can I have it by tomorrow, 2 p.m? Really? Can you do it by 10 a.m? All right, I'll buy it. No. The Sun Lounge was a new addition to the house, and many an evening was spent with the patio doors wide open, listening to the birds and watching the sun go down as a family, with me often reading poems by Roald Dahl aloud. The second photograph is a view out of what was my bedroom window. Now, in the summer, the sun would set over the Froome Valley, and the room would become insufferably hot. I remember cramming for my exams at a desk in that room which looked out at the view, and then collapsing into bed hoping that the exam questions might be kind to me. And the final shot is of the curtains in that same room. My mum loves bright interiors. Each room would be coordinated around a specific colour. As the sun came through the curtains yesterday, I realised that these simple curtains summed up one part of Mum's character. Her enthusiasm for making a lovely home for us all to live in. What a lovely sentiment, Helen. None of these shots are technically good. None of them are necessarily artistically strong. But for me, they are a way to hold on to some of those precious memories of my childhood that I may otherwise lose. I've realised that that's my why. That's why I take photographs. Simply to remember places and people, but most of all, feelings. As always, thanks for the wonderful episodes of the podcast. It really is something special. Sending best wishes from Hampshire land, Helen. Helen, when you talk about special, it's letters like that, and I mean it genuinely, that make this such a privilege. And it is, I mean that. With a capital P, you know me with my lowercase and uppercase. It's an uppercase P, a privilege to present. The letters make all the difference, they really do. So thank you. And I'm going to share those pictures on the show page today. And, well, that's a great why story, isn't it? That really is. Take pictures today that become treasured gifts of your tomorrows. I think that's what I take away from this. It's the photo walk of a Friday. Me with my camera and your letters, you with your camera, and hopefully writing a letter at some stage in the future. Let me take another sketchbooker What I want to do now, this lens, I'm using a Yashica 28mm vintage lens on this Fujifilm X Pro 1. It's a camera I love. I'd never get rid of it. I mean, it wouldn't be worth much anyway, so it's hardly gonna support the family. But it's a camera I love. It just feels. I think the Fujifilm X Pro 1. Sound like I'm doing an advert. Let me just say, I think the X Pro 1 just is a beautiful weight. It's a super camera to carry around. And because I've got it married to a vintage lens, it means that everything becomes manual. Now, this is not really a super macro lens, but I'm going to try and get, since it's raining and we're being doused now, without a doubt, I want to try and get this sort of the rich, lush rain falling on the vegetation along the path I'm walking. Let's open up a bit. 2.8, 1/2. Here we go. Oh, hang on. Focus is not quite right. It's very difficult trying to focus on a manual camera, holding a microphone in one hand, a camera in the other. I need some way to focus. I'm just doing it with my little pinky pushed round the lens. There we go. In focus. I was about to say perfect. I'm not sure. And anyway, who needs perfection? We've been there already, Neil. I know we have. Yes. Right, assignment time. This month, it was set by our good friend Valerie Jardin, and I don't think I reminded you of the assignment last week. No, I didn't. I may have done the week before. We've got one more week. We're in the last knockings of April now, the last few days of April. Oh, by the way, I did get a message saying, does it mean if I listen to because I know that you don't follow the show necessarily week by week religiously, and sometimes you're playing catch up a bit. If you hear this show in a couple of months' time, look, heavens, if you hear it in 6 months' time, it doesn't matter. We still have a show page that's relevant for this episode. Please do send in your pictures for the assignments, because an assignment is not, we can't do the Christmas metaphor, can we? No. Anyway, do send in. I'd still like to hear from you. Assignment time then is set by Valerie Jardin. Next week we will have a brand new assignment, it being the first Friday of the month. Oh, next Friday. What's happening next Friday? Oh yeah, I'm photographing a wedding. I almost thought it was coronation. No, that's Saturday. I'm photographing a wedding on the Saturday as well. I rarely get to see special events on the telly. I always watch them through a lens on a television at an event that I'm photographing. It's quite an out-of-body experience. Shall we just remind ourselves of that assignment? And then you've got 1 week from now, clock's ticking, if you're listening to this on the day of publishing. You've got 1 week, even if you're doing this in six months' time, it's really just a week you've got. Try and do it within the week. You've got a week to join in with the assignment.
The Photowalk assignment.
Now, for this assignment, I'm saying this with a wry smile, Valerie, because I don't think necessarily you would want to create one yourself. Or you might say, yes, I would. So this assignment is
creating a self-portrait, but a street style self-portrait. And actually,
yes.
You're wrong, because I have a gallery on my website called Mirrored Me, and they're all reflections of me on the streets.
Yes, of course you do. But I was thinking back to our conversation where you said, I don't want to be in portraits.
No,
but of course, it's not that
I
sort of
want
picture.
control of.
Yeah. So this one, I suppose you're embracing your inner Vivian Maya for this one, which is an entirely different sort of feeling.
Yeah, and it's fun. You can. My series is all in black and white, and it's reflections in windows and mirrors and partially hidden. This is the when I look the best.
Valerie.
Or just something really fun that you do in passing, not something you're going to go out and plan. Something that will be very creative, but spontaneous. It's all about the spontaneity. So, there are people who've done amazing self-portrait series that are really staged and complicated. But who has time for that? This is more something you would do as if it was a street shot, but it's a street shot of yourself. I mean, your most available subject, right? You're always with yourself. So you use it to try some techniques with reflections, with mirrors and things like that. So it's all about learning.
We must put actually the link to this gallery, which I'm now deeply embarrassed about. Because I'd seen this gallery of yours before, and we may have even talked about it in our first discussion. But the one there's a few in here I particularly love. There's a very 60s looking Valerie here with a sort of the dark hair, sort of the fringe sort of falling over your eyes, and you've sort of crouched down in front of a mirror. Fantastic, I love that. And I love the multiple explosion, the multiple exposure picture that you've taken. That's fantastic. So it's really about being inventive. It's not just about standing in front of a mirror, is it? It's thinking, what can I do?
Try techniques that you want to practice. Double exposure is a great one. Work with double exposures and use yourself as a subject. Again, you're your most available subject at all times. Work with some interesting light. You can actually put your camera on a tripod if you want. I mean, the sky is the limit, but do something creative and fun and learn something in the process. I think that's the part that's important to keep in mind. Every time we press the shutter, we're learning. So
reflections, shadows, double exposures. I'm the one subject that's always with me, is what you said on that website page. And it's true, isn't it? It's very true. Good luck with that one. Bring out I'm not going to say Vivian Maier, bring out your inner Valerie Jardin.
Good luck.
So there we go. That's the assignment for this month. 7 days you've got left to get these pictures in, and then we'll go for a new assignment next month. I'm chuckling slightly because a moment ago I was walking along and I thought, look at that, a slow worm. I obviously need to wear my glasses. I don't wear glasses when I've got my camera because I use the diopter usually in the camera. Funnily enough, the X Pro 1 is slightly different in that respect, but it wasn't a slow worm. It was a great big thick lace from a boot, which I might take back with me. Why would somebody leave a perfectly good lace there? Should I pick that up, or is it, if I pick it up, will I suddenly get trapped? Is there a big trap suddenly going to whoosh, pull me up into a tree? Neil, you're watching far too many Predator movies. Maybe. Thank you for your thoughts that you leave about the shows in the comments, he says, sounding like a key change. It's always heartening to hear from you, and this reminded me to remind you to share this podcast with your friends. I'm trying to think of a natty way to say, let's not keep this the best kept secret in the podcast sphere, because niche podcasts like what this is are much harder I don't really want to use the word market because it seems very businessy. Neil, it is a business. You're trying to do this more full time so you can go on amazing adventures, take us with you, start to do pop-up events and pop-up walks and pop-up this and pop-up that. Yes, you're absolutely right. So yeah, they are harder to market. So if you can share it with your friends, that's fantastic. And because it's a photo walk, and everybody, as we say, there's 7 billion people. Not everybody, but nearly everybody has a camera of sorts, smartphones included. Yeah, they count. So if you can share it with your friends, say, look, there's a podcast here. I think you might enjoy it. It's just a bloke with a microphone that walks along, that reads letters, that speaks to interesting people, photographers that tell stories of life. I think you'll like this one, Auntie Mildred. And she might pass it on to a few of her mates. You never know. So here's a comment that was left after last week's show. There were quite a few comments over the last month or so, and I will get round to... I've answered pretty much all of them, I think, by now. Should certainly read some more out, but this one came from Dennis Linden. I was FTing with my father-in-law. FTing. Neil, don't you know what that means? Well, it's perfectly innocent because the male is innocent here, but what does that mean? FTing with my father-in-law, with whom I'd shared a link to this page for him to listen. He's not a photographer. He nevertheless enjoyed the podcast. He grew up in and about Hull, This, by the way, is in response to last week's programme where we went to York and Grimsby and Cleethorpes. He grew up in and around Hull and had many stories to share about that whole region, from York to Cleethorpes. His gran and granddad owned a bake shop in Hessel, which was demolished to make way for the Humber River Bridge there. You might have driven over it on the A15. We did indeed. It's a magnificent bridge. It really is. I think at one stage it was one of the... Was it the biggest in the UK? At one stage. I think these super structures, they get divided by another super structure at some stage, don't they? The mention of black magic chocolates, yeah, we talked about... I mean, York has a history of confectionery and candy making, and we did mention a few of the different brands within, didn't we? It was Black Magic chocolates. We mentioned, was it 1812? I'm sure it was 1812. Don't know why it was called 1812. We talked about chocolate orange, one of my favourites. But Dennis says it brought back fond memories from my childhood, when one box would be shared with a whole extended family back in Canada. This episode certainly tugged at the heartstrings, Neil. Good on you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased it did. And it reminded me a lot of my grandfather. We've talked about my granddad, haven't we? My granddad and grandma that had a sweet shop, a tobacconist and confectioner's shop in Enfield, along the Great Cambridge Road that ran into the north of London. And I'm sure we'll mention it again in the future. The idea that I think I must have been quite angelic at that stage. Angelic, you, Neil? Really? No, I mean in terms of that I would go to stay with Grandma and Granddad, and I would stay in a room on a bed that was over the... Well, I wasn't so worried about the tobacco, but certainly they had chocolate stores in there. And I remember the Fry's chocolates being in there. And those bars were my favourite. I don't think I ever pinched one. I really, hand on heart, I was allowed to put my hands into the halfpenny sweets that Grandad sold proudly, but I don't think I ever took anything that I wasn't supposed to take. I really don't. And it was, I tell you what, it was an emporium of deliciousness, of temptation. Of that there is no doubt. Right, we met two photographers behind the book Literal earlier in today's show, John Ash and Paul Gotts. It's time to meet one of the photographers. There's three photographers in all, as you heard, and one of them is a very special friend of this show. It's Lynn Fraser, who is also an extra miler. And I thought it might be a nice idea to talk to Lynn about the photographs that she contributed to the book. Not all the photographs, but a handful of them. And I'm going to put the pictures on the pictures that she talks about on the show page today, so that you can reference them and the stories she's about to tell about them. So this is an extra miler friend of ours and contributing photographer to the book. It's Lynn Fraser. Lynn, did you have to look up the word literal as well?
Yes.
So
just to make sure it was what I thought it was.
Yeah, it's not in a literal sense. It's not that context. Literal is by the sea. It's coastline, it's shoreline, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's almost that liminal space between the land and the sea.
So how did you, we've covered a little bit of ground in our conversation already with John and Paul, but how did you become involved in the project? And there's only three photographers in this one, so it's quite nice that it's an intimate number of photographers involved in this one.
Yes, and all women as well.
Yeah.
That was quite coincidental, but that was quite a nice surprise. A friend of mine sent me the link to the call that Paul and John had put out for photographers to apply. So it was an application process. You had to write a few words about why you wanted to get involved with the project and give them links to examples of your work.
But the moment then they said yes, a mild sense of panic spread in, I'm sure, or when you thought, oh, now I've just made myself a project.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that the panic was mild.
Did you start shooting straight away for it then?
No, because good old imposter syndrome completely set in, and I just didn't quite know how to approach it. And also the brief was very, very wide. Literally, it was the coast and black and white, and then the rest was just left to us. So given that the remit was so wide, I did feel at a bit of a loss as to how to start the project. So I had to pare it right back, and I sat and thought about what sort of things I like to photograph. And given my background in archaeology, I do like man-made structures, and I do find myself drawn to structures at times in my photography. So I thought, right, man-made structures, and then I started to think about locations that I could get to quite easily where I knew there were different types of man-made structures. And it also meant I got out and explored some areas that I hadn't been to before, even though they're on my doorstep.
Great exercise, isn't it? If somebody says, right, see, black and white, go make.
Absolutely, and it's what Paul was talking about when you were walking around York with them, about going out with the mindset that you're going to photograph. You haven't just gone out with your camera and you might take a few images. I went out with a purpose, and that did actually make a big difference.
Let's talk about the pictures. You've kindly sent 5 that we can show on the show page. And of course, the rest of the work from the other photographers and the rest of your photographs that feature within Literal, we have to buy the book, don't you? But we've got 5 to start with, and I wondered whether, and you can reference these on the show page as we talk about them. Let's start with Mermaid of the North.
It's at a small village called Ballantor, which is on the eastern seaboard, not that far away from the Black Isle where I live. And despite it being there for about 14 years, I've never been to visit it until I'd gone out with my camera specifically for this project. So that's what I'm saying. It got me out and going to places that I just hadn't been to. It was produced by a local sculptor back in 2007. And it was originally made of wood and resin, but unfortunately she was damaged by a severe storm in 2012. So she's now a bronze cast model. Yeah. And she sits on a rock called Clach Du, which means black rock in Gaelic. And the reason that she was chosen, the mermaid was chosen, that in Easter Ross folklore, there's a legend that tells that once a fisherman stole a beautiful mermaid away to be his wife and hid her tail. And years later, after bearing his children, she found her tail and escaped back to the sea, returning regularly to the shore to bring fish for her hungry children.
I think I've heard of this story before. Maybe it is that you've told me that story. I don't know, but I think I do know that folklore.
I think it's a story that applies to a lot of fishing communities. I think it's a familiar tale of somebody stealing a mermaid away from the sea and hiding her tail so she can't go back to the sea.
Oh, they're a bit ten a penny, do you mean?
Well, maybe wouldn't put it quite as boldly as that.
I keep my mermaid just in the sound room over there. Don't you? Where do you keep your mermaid? No, I didn't mean it to sound like that. It's as a picture, as you look at it, one thing you've done, and there's I would assume you've done this through all your pictures, is they have a certain there's a clean look to them. They're not cluttered, these pictures.
No, I quite like a minimalistic style. I don't like too much clutter in the images. And also, I was sitting on the beach and going back to mindful photography that we've spoken about before, it was very calming sitting on the beach, just watching the waves rolling around the rock. I could have shot it from a different angle and had the headland in and buildings, but I didn't want that. I just wanted to show her sitting by herself in the sea.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a slightly longer shutter.
Yes,
time on this because we've got a little bit of cotton wool effect in the water, which is one of I like that. I do like to see that. Moving on to Time and Tide Bell. Now, the Time and Tide Bell, you have told of the history of the Time and Tide Bell, but in our Extra Mile Zoom at some stage, I'm sure. So you'll need to furnish us with what a Time and Tide Bell is.
So this particular bell that I photographed is up in Lewis, the Isle of Lewis. In fact, it's off Boster Beach, which is on Grand Bernera, which is a small island off the Isle of Lewis.
An island of an island.
Island off an island, right. Yes. Yeah. So the Time and Tide bells are an art project between designer Marcus Vergette, who's a UK sculptor, and an Australian bell designer called Neil McLaughlin. And there are various bells installed around the coast in the UK. The Boster Bell is the only one in Scotland. And I think it was installed back in 2010, and it was the second one that was installed. The first one was at Appledore in Devon.
And I assume that as the tide comes in and comes across the, as you see, because I can see the water gently rising in your picture, that it rises, it rings the bell. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's also to highlight climate change and act as a reminder that sea levels are rising. And obviously if the sea patterns change around the coast, then the pattern of the ringing of the bell will change as well.
Whoa, that's haunting.
It is.
I bet that's haunting at night as well, that bell just starts to...
It could be quite eerie, I think, yes.
Right, the third picture, I mentioned this last week on the show with Paul when we came across a pillbox as we were walking. And I do think if I had all the time in the world and my famous lotto win that I occasionally talk about, I think if I was looking for a project, I am fascinated by the pillboxes that we have, not just around the UK, because it's not just something that's in this country. You found them across Europe, and I dare say in other parts of the world as well. They were essentially gun emplacements, not always small, but generally the ones that I'm fascinated by, sort of modestly sized concrete, usually square or rectangular, sometimes circular. There's a wonderful one on Studland Beach which is circular, where you'd have had would often have been, I think, Home Guard in the UK within them, sort of looking out towards any invading armies. And this is the Rose Isle pillbox, which is, like many pillboxes, now just gradually being devoured by the sand it sits upon.
Yes, I think when these pillboxes were originally built, they were above the high water mark, but that's changed since 1940, which is when I think they were installed. So Rose Isle Beach, just to situate it, is between Burghead and Findhorn on the Moray coast of Scotland. And back in 1940, a survey was carried out of the beach by Admiral Dreyer, and he concluded that the beach was actually suitable for landings, which is why there was a series of pillboxes and anti-tank blocks constructed along the 7 miles of beach. And also because it was so good for landings, it was actually used by the Americans and Canadians for training exercises for the D-Day landings.
Right.
And apparently off the coast there are 8 amphibious tanks that sank during the training exercises.
That would be fascinating. I would imagine they've been wreck dived, I should think, or entirely lost. I don't know. Do you ever poke your head inside these things? I get a bit spooked.
I did.
You did?
I did. Yes. I was going to crawl into one, and then I sniffed and decided I wouldn't bother.
They don't pass the sniff test. That's for sure. It's a shame that these structures, I mean, you couldn't use this one on the beach because it is listing quite heavily, your one here. It's a shame that they're not used for, and I don't know of any that are, so correct me if you're listening to this and think, I know one that's used as an ice cream parlour, but they're not used as other things, are they?
No, but these ones, some of them I think were damaged during the D-Day landing exercises. I think some of them were blown up, so some of them are damaged. And I think the one that's in the photograph might be a Type 24 pillbox.
My word, that's proper
technical now.
Yeah, it's proper collector's knowledge almost.
Yeah, so it's a hexagon, but it's not a proper hexagon. One of the sides is longer than a normal hexagon, and then so it's straight, and then you get the other 5 sides.
You've just given me my homework now to go and look up all the types.
Well, there's a very handy website that I'll send you the link to. Otherwise, I wouldn't know.
I've noticed by your photography that you have allowed for space on one, so you've very much worked to thirds in the way that you've composed. You've placed. There's something, I don't know whether it's your eye, Lynn. Maybe I've spotted this in other photographs of yours. You place firmly to the right a lot of your interesting things that you make photographs of. And although it doesn't work entirely through the whole collection, doesn't work on the wreck we're about to talk about, it does work on the others. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not deliberate.
Is it just something that you do, that you place your your subject on the right of pictures. Have you ever noticed that?
Well, somebody picked it up on the African trip that I was on, actually, that some of my portraits, I have people at the side. It probably is usually the right. It might be something to do with the fact I'm a left eye shooter.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. But it was pointed out to me. So, but I like negative space.
Yeah. Well, which brings us on to the Diabeg wreck.
Yes.
Which is another thing I'm fascinated by. Wrecks that you come across sometimes at the coast, and you find they're just poking out. Where is it?
It's at Lower Diabeg, which is on the west coast of Scotland, near Torridon, which is probably a name that people would recognise more than Diabeg. And it's right on the beach. It's right on the shore.
Which explains why kids have, or whoever's put ropes and tires around it to swing from it.
Yeah, it's very easily accessible. So it was a trawler, I think, called the Dayspring.
Right.
And it was originally built at a shipyard in Buckie, which is again on the Moray coast. And it was originally called Strathire and was renamed, I think, in the late 80s. And then at some point after that, it was deregistered or decommissioned. I'm not sure what the correct name is. And it was anchored offshore at Lower Diabeg. And then again, our wonderful storms that we get up here. Yeah. Drove it onto the beach, and it's been there ever since, and it is deteriorating.
Well, there's hardly anything left of it. There's no wheelhouse that you can see.
No, it's quite skeletal now.
Yeah, it is very. Now, the last picture that we've got, and if you want to see the rest, you'll have to buy the book, Rattray Head Lighthouse. Lighthouses are another thing that absolutely fascinate me. This looks like it's in a particularly rugged part of the world, well used to being beaten by storms by the looks of it. Is it still a working lighthouse?
It is, but it's obviously not manned anymore.
No, none of them are. I think they're all manned from hundreds of miles away.
Yeah. I think 1982 was when it went fully automatic.
Yeah.
So it's actually only a few metres off the shore, actually. But that stretch of coastline is quite dangerous, and I think it was petitioned for years and years before they actually built a lighthouse there. And it's one of our wonderful Stevenson lighthouses, and was built in 1895 by David Allen Stevenson. There was quite a family of them.
Can you get out to it? Because it looks like does the tide go out far enough to reach it?
I think when the tide goes out far enough, you could certainly walk out to it or get very close to it.
I've got this very romantic notion of living in a lighthouse, being my sort of artisan self, making podcasts and whatever, living in a lighthouse, and the sound of the sea battering against the side of the structure. They are wonderful things, aren't they? Did this instantly come to mind when you thought, right, black and white, by the water, got to do a lighthouse?
I like lighthouses, and my middle son is at university in Aberdeen, so one of the trips down to drop him off at his flat, I did a detour so I could go and visit the lighthouse. And it's a well-known lighthouse, it's well photographed, but I was the only one there. It was brilliant. It's just me and the cormorants and a wicked wind.
Yeah, and I really like the way that you've shot through the landscape here, or what would those be, the sort of the
marron grass.
The marron grass. That you've shot through it. That looks really nice, and that brings an edge of interest to the foreground, doesn't it?
Yeah, I tried all sorts of things. I've got various images of that lighthouse, because there was a lovely reflection in the wet sand as well, which was rather nice.
It's lovely the way the clouds are dissecting with the top of the lighthouse as well. Not that you were able to plan that bit, but it is perfect.
No, but it was helpful. Yes, yeah.
How much post processing do you do to your black and whites? I know some people go in. I mean, if you went in like, I don't know, Don McCullin, you'd have that cloud looking very foreboding.
I didn't do an awful lot. I mean, I did some processing, but I'm not someone who likes to sit in front of the computer for hours tweaking away images. You know, it's a few sliders and that's it.
Really? Okay, so it's a light touch.
Yes,
I think that would be the way. Well, it looks like you had a lot of fun doing this project. How long did it take to put together so you had everything in place for John and Paul for the book?
We were told in the August that we'd been successful, and then we had until the end of October to submit our images. And of course, I was away as well in October, so I kind of gave myself the end of September as my deadline, although I then went up to the Isle of Lewis in October as well, so I got a few images from that. But I had a complete panic right at the end of October because I managed to delete my whole Lightroom catalogue.
Oh my word.
I got it back, thank goodness for Time Machine. But But it took me quite a while to figure out how to get it back from Time Machine. So I was sending frantic messages to Paul and John saying, I might not get them in for the end of October. I've got the images, but I'm going to have to go back and start processing everything again. So.
Well, thanks to Lynn Fraser, and yes, I shall leave book details on the show page today, along with links to other photographers that you've heard from or about today. The socials, the websites, there's some films there to watch. I've got some notes to self that I've made. It's quite a useful system doing this, because my studio self later on, sitting in the warm out of the rain, gets these notes to self and pops them on the show page. It's good teamwork between me and me. It really is. So go to today's show page, episode number 378 on photowalk.show, or follow the link in the podcast player app that will also take you there. Oh, navigating around the mud. Oh, it's got muddier and definitely rainier. Well, that's why it's got muddier, Neil. It's raining. It's raining hard now. Whew, put myself under this tree for a while. Is this safe? This one's freshly fallen. Well, I'll say freshly, maybe a month or so ago. Maybe don't stand underneath the tree, Neil. Right. Our play-out song today is from Age of the Bear. I like this band, or this act. A few more moments together, listening to a song, making some photographs from our photo walk together, as we listen to a song called Going With The Flow, which is quite an up, light and breezy number. I like this one. I wanted something light, certainly following the Zadok moment right at the head of the show today. So that's our play-out song, but first you need a postscript. Yes, a PS for the show. And I thought a couple of words about travel might be nice today, but travel tied into the book metaphor, I thought that would be particularly apposite. So who better to choose to share lucid thoughts on the subject of travel and books than Saint Augustine? Yes. The theologist and philosopher of Berber. Ah, that's the one, Neil. Yes, I know. Who sometime between AD 354 and AD 430, which is not type numbers of certain Airbuses, for the Philistines who, like me, were blissfully unaware of what Zadok the priest was, sometime between those dates, he said the following words, and you'll like these. The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only a page.
I spend my days scrolling down my feed online, and all the finds, all my friends are doing well. One's playing shows of thousands, one's traveling the world, while I'm wondering how far I fell. No, I'd like to ask the ghost of time, is it worth a second try? Will I rise above the clouds, or just get lost within the skies? Well, comparison and prediction will only tie me to the ground, so I'll try to stop from sinking further down. Conversations with myself can get so out of hand, but I think I'm getting closer to the truth. Not everything that's thorn and lights can make it past the glare, and to make a change that lasts beyond its youth. Oh, I'd like to ask the ghost of time, will I look within and look behind? Will I wrestle with this moment, wash me in its tide? Well, it seems that my resistance to the flow just slows me down, so I'll go the way it wants me to for now.
Age of the Bear and Going with the Flow. And that's it for this week. My thanks to John Ash, Paul Gotts and Lynn Fraser. The Extra Mile is out, and a reminder that this week I'm talking with Randy Bullerwell about a wonderful book project. It's books, books and more books this week, for good reason. And we hear a little more from Paul Hudson about projects, so go across now to hear that. Or, of course, you can walk with me while you listen, while we spend time walking together at the weekend. Next week, on Friday, a photographer of 5 decades, some of that time spent photographing on the street along the famous Hollywood Walk of Fame. Ave Pildes is my guest.
You know, when you get to a certain point, if you're doing the same thing every day, you try and look for variations.
Yeah.
So sometimes I would put my tripod and the camera down pretty low, and I was always using a wide-angle lens. So why did I have it very low? Because I was interested in what the people look like when you can't see their faces.
Final virtual fist bumps go to Neil Ford, head of stuff that only works after he's given it a reboot. Official. Emily Renier for your eyes in our Facebook group, and Andrea Gilpin, Chief of Staff on the Instagram and Ideas Floor, to Artlist, to Epidemic for the music, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.